Hello and welcome everyone to Frontline Dispatches, an organizing effort dedicated to spotlight organizing and activism happening and beyond. Plus, you can stay tuned for each episode of Frontline Dispatches every Wednesday at 8 p.m. That's 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and of course, 4 p.m. My name is Jayanni, and I will be your host today. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, please leave comments and questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring those as we go on from our Q&A. And if you haven't yet, throw up a like on Facebook and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Finally, stay with all the amazing content coming out of Oregon. Sign up at our website, that's organizingupgrade.com. There, you will find events, videos, and articles about left strategy for organizing. Okay, let's get into it. I'm hearing some feedback. Just give us 1 second to fix the feedback. And then we'll go ahead and introduce our So we're going to be going into the podcast today with our guest. He is a union organizer and serves on the steering committee for the Democratic Socialist of America's Labor Commission, aka the DSLC. We want to welcome Daniel at this time.
Hey, my name's Daniel Dominguez. I'm local Los Angeles, USA, healthcare industry. For the Democratic Socialist DS national body organizations work and orientation. So I'm happy to proact and really.
Awesome, thank you, Daniel. I think we have feedback issues, but we're going to keep going on with the show as we try to resolve some of the tech issues. We do hope that our audience at home can hear us just fine. If you can't, please leave us a comment in the chat so we can see if we can resolve some of the speaker issues. So we are so lucky, Daniel, to have you on the show to talk with us about the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, popularly known as the PRO Act. Labor unions leading the fight, such as the Painters Union, are saying that there hasn't been positive labor law reform of this scale in nearly 100 years. That it would fundamentally change the balance of power by making it possible for more workers to form a union and fight workplace democracy. Meanwhile, the right-wing talking point is that the PRO Act would strip workers of their freedom of choice. DSA, very early on, made a clear decision to make the PRO Act a national priority during the first 100 days of the new presidential administration. So let's kind of begin there. If workers had a different playing field under the PRO Act, DSA is saying it can restore organized labor as a major fighting force across the country, making it more possible to win things like the Green New Deal. Can you tell us how and why DSA reached this conclusion?
And I think it's at our DS, it's still relevant, but it has matured a lot. Scene is coming to DSA, Oklahoma. So in the last, at least, what I more.
So we lost connection with Daniel just now. Want to apologize to our audience who are tuning in tonight to hear us discuss the PRO Act and DSA's organizing to support it. We are going to support Daniel in getting back onto the show so that we can finish the conversation. But we also want to encourage you all to post in comments, questions that you have in the chat so that we can hop right back into discussion when Daniel comes back. As you all know, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act has been introduced and has passed the House already in Congress. And so there's a lot of momentum behind this bill. Some of the biggest features of the PRO Act have to do with making it more legally possible for more workers to actually have the right to organize and unionize on the job. There are protections for undocumented workers. And also we have the opportunity to hold employers accountable for anti-union activity. So employers, for example, would no longer get to hold workers hostage in meetings to deliver anti-union propaganda. And so we're excited to have Daniel speak to us about some of those protections and why DSA is fighting so hard to pass the PRO Act. So yeah, right on time.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, Daniel, again. Rolling with the changes. So yeah, I think we want to hear directly from you, like how and why DSA reached the conclusion that the PRO Act would have this kind of balance of, would reshape the balance of power between workers and employers, and how you see it fitting into DSA's larger strategy.
Right. Yeah. So as I was saying, you know, over the past couple of years, DSA has seen more and more like talented organizers and just a more sophisticated analysis of the role of labor in building socialism. Although the labor movement has been on its, you know, sort of like on its back feet for several decades now, due to the restrictive labor law regime currently in place, you know, organized labor is still an important and vital force for working people everywhere. And you know, and in DSA, working class organization, we want to build working class power. So the PRO Act, we recognize it as an opportunity to revitalize that fighting militant labor movement that we saw in, you know, up until the, you know, a little bit past the mid-century. Mm-hmm. That really was able to win, you know, economic security for the working class. You know, you didn't have to work several jobs. You had one good union job that allowed you to pay, you know, have a family, pay for your home, all of that. And so, you know, the PRO Act has been in existence since at least 2019. So it wasn't until late 2020 that we, you know, the broader left, I think, started to recognize that there was an opportunity to pass the PRO Act, which is, you know, it's transformative change in the current labor law. So with that paired with Democrats in control of the Senate, the House, and now the presidency, although it's pretty slim control, mm-hmm. We saw it as a real opportunity to get the PRO Act passed. And more importantly, it's part of a longer strategy to build worker power so that we can eventually pass policies like the Green New Deal down the road.
Excellent. Sounds like an incredible feat, but also something that we should be fighting for right now in this moment. But I kind of want to go back to what you said about building worker militancy, reviving the labor movement. DSA is not a labor union, right? So how does your organizing work fit into this larger push to pass the PRO Act? How are you, say, reaching workers and organizing workers through DSA?
Yeah, so I think just in our day-to-day work, for example, on the DSLC, the members of the steering committee are embedded in the labor movement in different ways, whether it's being an organizer for a labor union, or being a rank and file member, an activist within your union. And so we have, like I said, we have to see we see DSA and the labor movement as two vital forces in building a fighting working class. So for example, in my chapter in Los Angeles, we have a labor committee, which is made up of working class people, some who are union, some who are not, and we see building that labor, labor as a key player, as just important in everything we do. Right? It's not just a discrete issue; it informs every part of our work. And so the way we're reaching our members in this campaign to pass the PRO Act is making sure that as many chapters, as many members as possible are plugged into this campaign. So while this is a national campaign that does require a lot of moving pieces, one of those important moving pieces is talking to chapters. DSA is currently, like I said, is still a maturing organization. Our structures are still maturing. So it's extremely vital for us to be talking to our base, our members. And so one of the ways we're doing that is the campaign has a coaching team, which is in charge of talking to chapters who have less resources, who are operating in maybe hostile terrain like the South. Maybe they're an organizing committee that isn't a fully fledged chapter. And so those chapters are not going to have the dearth of resources and organizers that a chapter like Los Angeles or San Francisco might have. So again, part of this campaign is mobilizing the mass of our membership to do this. This is a priority campaign for all of DSA, and so the coaching team is one way. The other way we're mobilizing our membership is through the phone banking. And so we want to get as many people dialing those 5 key senators as possible.
Amazing. And I think DSA is over 80,000 members at this time. So it's a lot of people to mobilize, and also an incredible effort. And so our hats are off to you. But for many watching the kind of Pass the PRO Act campaign, whether they've been active in it or not, it would appear that the bill doesn't have a chance of passing the Senate if we cannot get a handful of moderate Democrats to vote yes. Does DSA share this assessment? And how are you all planning to, say, push the PRO Act across the finish line?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think a lot of the criticisms of the possibility of passing the PRO Act are valid, but they shouldn't shape our strategy. So the analysis that we're working with comes from, again, experienced organizers in the Painters Union and the Communication Workers of America in DSA. There is a path to victory, although it may be narrow. So currently we see 5 moderate Democrats in the Senate sort of holding this up. So 2 of those from Arizona are Mark Kelly and Kristen Sinema, Angus King from Maine. You got Mark Warner from Virginia and Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So those are the 5 senators that we're targeting as part of this campaign. So that's the first part of the campaign, like I said, is going to be about mobilizing voters to get them to call their senators or any other action to get them to raise this as an issue, as a working class issue. Now, as part of that analysis, we also recognize that Democrats have a slim hold over the Senate. Now, we're also operating in the Senate with the filibuster. So the filibuster is seen as a major obstacle to passing any progressive legislation, not just the PRO Act. So our campaign hasn't reached that point yet, right? We're still pressuring these senators, and while we're still cognizant of the filibuster at the Senate level. But I think not all signs, but some signs point towards potential filibuster reform. So I think we're hopeful. The labor movement is hopeful. And I don't want to walk into this campaign or ask anyone to walk into it with blind optimism. I think we're living through a period of unrest, and it's our job to organize DSA and labor to fight for the PRO Act.
Yeah, I like what you said about that there's a path to victory, even though it might be narrow, and laying out some of the contours of what it looks like to pass this bill in Congress, this act. The PRO Act has massive support right now amongst 180 unions at this point. 50 state labor federations, and many building trade councils. So we're talking about millions and millions of union members who are behind it. But from a socialist perspective, we can view the Democrats as the neoliberal party, right? A party of capital. How should we make sense of the Democrats advancing and pushing such a radical bill? Do you believe it's a result of pressure and organizing, or would you say something else might be at play too?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't have like the most sophisticated take on this, but the past, I joined DSA just 2.5 years ago, right? Someone who was previously, like sort of political within the context of like what I thought and my beliefs. But I have seen just an influx of members into DSA and just like higher numbers of people who are becoming politically active and recognizing that voting is important to our civic and political life, but not enough. So I think there's just been a lot of unrest over the past couple of years, especially last summer. We saw millions of people pouring out into the street after the execution of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I think the Democrats, while I'm not going to say that we're pushing them left necessarily, but I think they are responding to pressure. And again, I just want to harp on this point a little bit. It's going to be labor and organized labor and workers. It's going to be up to them to organize themselves and to really make a push behind the PRO Act and make it just so unpalatable to be against the PRO Act. And I feel pretty confident that this campaign, the broader campaign, not just DSA's campaign, but the broader workers' campaign for the PRO Act, is doing that. I think we really are sort of raising this as an issue and actually changing the terrain on which we're operating.
Excellent. So I just want to remind our audience who's joining us tonight that I'm talking with Daniel Dominguez about the PRO Act. Daniel was a union organizer and member of DSA's Labor Commission. We again want to remind folks to drop your questions in the chat and we will have our guests answer them. So there may be some folks who are watching who may not be as familiar with what is involved with the PRO Act, some of the provisions. And from my read, it's not just about making it legally easier to organize or unionize or just kind of simply stopping anti-union activity from employers, but it kind of changes the landscape for workers of color, particularly Black and brown people. Do you believe this legislation will mark kind of a change for organized labor in terms of taking on racial justice more seriously?
Yeah. So the current labor law regime, the National Labor Relations Act, although it's been modified a few times, it still tilts almost entirely in the favor of employers. And one of the places that we've seen this the most is in the South. And other states where they have right to work laws, which is essentially a form of union busting, right? If the union cannot collect dues from all of its members, that will inevitably lead to ruin down the road. So, for example, what we're seeing right now in the Bessemer, Alabama election at the Amazon warehouse, if they're able to pull this off, it'll be against all odds because they have just been operating on terrain that is almost impossible to organize. We haven't seen any successful union drives in the South, at least any notable ones, any like large scale places in quite a while. So not only would it like pave the road to higher unionization rates across the country, it would repeal the right to work laws in those states. And importantly, I think it's important to mention here that currently, under the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRB cannot extend its protections to undocumented workers. And that benefits the employer, right? In places like the South, especially in poultry processing plants where we see a lot of migrant workers from Mexico, from Central America. And so, they're operating at the whim of the employer. We often, I can't, I'll be honest, I don't remember the exact location, but I remember just a year or two ago, we saw a massive immigration rate at a poultry plant where they had recently seen like a unionization campaign. So I'm a firm believer that having a union in the workplace leads to more racial solidarity. And so I think the PRO Act does, it establishes like a baseline in order to work on those racial justice issues.
Amazing. And I'm from the South. I live in Memphis, and thinking about repealing right to work in Tennessee would be a dream. Organizing in conditions where we have to do a lot more work just to get a piece of some of the rights that other workers enjoy across the country is very difficult. And so the PRO Act being able to open up more opportunities and rights for workers in the South is an incredible advancement. And the rights stronghold, right, is in the South. And I'm thinking about not just the moderate Democrats that have to be convinced whose votes we need to win. What does other opposition look like? Is there opposition from the right? Are there other actors coming in to lobby against the PRO Act? And how is DSA making sense of other obstacles being put in the way?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, the typical actors have come out against this, like the Chamber of Commerce. But, I think sort of interestingly, where we've seen a lot of the opposition, at least online, comes from, so-called freelancers. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And the opposition, at least to like a socialist like myself, does not seem organic. It seems very much like an AstroTurf campaign. But what we've seen on just whenever we have a message out there, like automatically within a couple of minutes, we'll see, freelancers. And it's usually, and it's sort of like they benefit from the sort of broadness of the term, because these people who are against the PRO Act claim to be against it because they think they claim that the ABC test contained in the PRO Act would automatically have them become an employee of their so-called clients. These freelancers, we're not talking about Uber drivers. We're not talking about people who do odd jobs here and there. These are like successful people who don't have an employer. They've been able to attain wealth through some of their work, which is all fine and good. But like the majority of freelancers are not that. And they are purposely misconstruing the ABC test, which again, in the case of the PRO Act, only applies when workers are organizing. It does not change the employee-employer relationship. So that has been, I think, one of the loudest voices of opposition here. And so DSA, we are a working class organization. We have people of all stripes. We have a lot of freelancers in this organization who would like to see the PRO Act pass. Like they are more representative of the freelancer that we think about. Right. And so we want to make sure that our analysis includes that. We want to uplift the voices of people who are freelancers and who would ultimately benefit from the passage of the PRO Act.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you clarified that point about the employer-employee relationship and what it actually says about freelancers. That's been one of the major talking points that I've heard in opposition, and I'm sure our audience is happy for the clarification too. And that's where we're going to turn now. We're going to take some questions from those who are watching. The first question is from Garrick. What national unions is DSA working with on the PRO Act campaign? What has it been like to work in coalition with these labor unions, explicitly from a socialist organization?
Yeah, so I'll go back again. Like as DSA matures, our relationships and our orientation to labor has also just become more advanced. So the Painters Union, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, has been the union at the forefront of this fight. They took this up when almost no one else was, and they still are the sort of the major player here. And the Communication Workers of America is the other major union. So those two unions, along with DSA, make up the current coalition that is pushing the PRO Act campaign. So I will say, in my own experience, it has been it's been such a wonderful experience to know that we're in coalition with these major unions, These are like fighting unions, right? That fight for their members, and they organize their members to fight for these things. So, but we need to expand that coalition, right? Like I think this is a really good start, but we have to expand it. We have to get the major unions, and we have to get the labor federations to put some muscle behind this campaign, because again, nothing that has improved the lives of the working class has ever been passed without a massive mobilization. So if you're out there in a union, if you're a member of a union, if you work for a union, get in touch with DSA or with the broader campaign to figure out how you can get your union on board.
A call to action. I love it. So we want to take another question from the audience. This is from Jeremiah. They would love to hear about the PRO Act and how it will interact with punitive anti-labor laws that currently prevent, for example, teachers in Mississippi from taking any kind of organized labor action. In Mississippi, they threaten them with criminal charges. So how would the PRO Act interact with anti-labor laws in certain states?
Yeah, so as we've as we've mentioned in this conversation, southern states not only have right to work laws, they also have a history of state forces taking coercive measures, usually violence, against workers. So doing away, and I'm that we're not operating in those times anymore. I recognize that, but it's still very difficult for any worker, public sector or private sector in those in those states to organize. So doing away with the right to work laws would be one of the major obstacles for workers organizing their unions. Again, I don't want to say it's going to unleash unionization across the South. But it will remove those structural barriers, and those structural barriers create real fear in workers. It's not like workers don't know that unions are good for them and that they would improve their lives. That's not it. It's just that they don't see they don't see any wins around them, and usually what they see is labor on the retreat, employers just winning out in all cases. So. I think, and what I'm getting at here is I think it would go a long way towards just giving workers a little bit of hope and a little bit of confidence. And along with unions, right? That they've been operating for the past couple of years on a more conservative bent, that they don't want to waste resources on organizing, in impossible conditions. And so I think when unions and workers are going to see this as a boon to improving their lives.
Yeah, I'm already feeling a lot of hope just from what you said and the possibilities of having a different terrain in which working people can actually take back the power in their workplaces, but also in their communities. This could transform entire communities. Can you speak a little bit about the ripple effect passing the PRO Act might have outside of the workplace?
Yeah, so I'll just start with my own experience as an organizer in the healthcare industry. We often, what I've often seen is just workers who want a union, but they know the odds they're up against. And I think once we sort of get rid of those structural barriers, give people hope and confidence that they can change their conditions in the workplace. I think that could translate into changing conditions outside of the workplace, like we saw last year during the uprisings in the summer. We saw just millions of people in the street, but I think what we didn't see was a lot of organizational and structural backing to this. So I think having an organized labor movement is just a boost to social movements, in the broader landscape, DSA included.
Awesome. Well, I want to turn back to where we started in the beginning of this conversation in terms of how DSA came to the conclusion to make this an organizational priority. Being that you're on the labor steering committee for DSA, what would you say are some of the lessons that you all are learning from this ongoing PRO Act campaign, whether you win or not? Whether we win or not, rather, what are some of the lessons that you're drawing out as an organizer, as a socialist?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our membership recognizes the importance of labor. So I think that's one lesson that we're learning. A lesson that I'm learning is that people out there are like hungry to plug into like a large scale campaign like this. So last week was a week of action where we made over 500,000 calls to voters in those key states. And people loved it, right? It was a good experience for many of them. I heard a couple of stories of people calling voters and just having positive experiences, talking to union members, talking to older folks in those states who were just like more than thrilled to call their senators and ask them to pass this. So that, and then I think DSA, as it's growing, is getting better at what it does. So we are, even if the PRO Act doesn't pass, we know how to run a large scale campaign. We know how to talk labor. We know how to be in coalition with labor unions. And I think going forward, my hope is that we will be taken more seriously by labor unions across the country.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That's the PRO Act. That's socialist solidarity. I think what DSA is bringing to this fight and to this table is incredibly important. And we want to thank you for talking about your organizing efforts, what y'all are learning, and your strategy to win. So to our audience, if you enjoyed this video, stay up to speed on all the amazing content coming out of Organizing Upgrade. You can do that by signing up at our website, which is organizingupgrade.org. There you will hear first about upcoming events, videos, and articles about left strategy for organizers. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again, Daniel Dominguez, and thank you to the production team at Organizing Upgrade. Please join us next week, same day, Wednesday, at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and of course, 4 p.m. Pacific for another episode of Frontline Dispatches.